Hey everyone, welcome to my next video here. This is a little bit different of a video. This is a walk around and driving tour of a 2006 Mercedes-Benz Unimog U500 North American spec. This was a test drive that I did on this vehicle for consideration of buying it and turning it into an expedition camper as my next vehicle build out. And so this is a tour of it. It was I did choose not to buy this vehicle, and I've shared a little bit more about that, and I'll share a little bit in this video about that. But certainly for those of you who are really curious about a Unimog and what a North American spec Unimog, and which are incredibly rare, it's definitely an interesting vehicle. To give you a little bit of perspective, just this bed here is almost 60 inches off the ground, just the base of it. This bed is actually three-way tilting, meaning it can lift up and tilt sideways to either side or backwards to dump things out. You can see here the portal axles, the pintle hook for the rear trailer. It does have air brakes for both the trailer and of course the vehicle itself. These tires are 46-inch tall tires. In my previous video you can learn more about the Unimog itself and some of those interesting facts about it. And this underneath, you can see it's easy to get underneath this vehicle because it is so tall. This here's the radiator, and it has two radiators, one on each side, that are actually behind the steps going up into the cab, which is interesting. So they're not in the front of the vehicle. And you can see it has a very stubby, short nose, make it very easy to see over the front, as I did talk about in my previous video as well. These are hydraulic connections, which it does have multiple ports for both and connection points in the front and rear. You can see there's also a front PTO, a power takeoff, that is rated to the full torque capabilities of this engine, which is over 700 foot-pounds of torque. The cab itself is actually made of carbon fiber, and so it's very light, and that little nose can pop open to access the different service things that need to be taken care of. Anyways, and this is and these are the air brakes here on the side. So a very interesting vehicle for sure. Wish there was more of them here in the United States. They do make great, or can make great, expedition campers. And so if you watch more of this video, you'll see what it's like to drive one. This one does have a fully automated transmission. It's fully manual or fully automated. I did drive it in this video here in fully automated mode, so I'm not using the clutch. It shifts on its own. I did that just to make sure I wasn't misshifting in it in any way. And you'll hear it shift up and down and speed up. It does rev at a very low RPM. I did take it on the freeway and test it out at some higher speeds of between about 65 to 70. Driving the Unimog is a little bit different than typical vehicles. You can see you're very elevated up here. It's got this interesting little center console that moves with the steering wheel. The air conditioning was a bit inadequate in this vehicle, so it didn't really put up that much cool air relative to the heat in this area and humidity in this area. But nonetheless, it was a fairly easy vehicle to drive, even though it starts with being a little bit intimidating just because of its size. And also its unique transmission, which is air actuated, 8 gears forward and reverse, fully synchronized. It typically starts in second or third, and it also has working end crawler gears. And this transmission, one can shift at any time manually or leave it in manual mode. I tried a bit of both, and it does shift relatively quickly and makes for a fairly controllable driving experience. And while it does not seem like I'm going all that fast, the speed limit here is around 65, and I am going roughly that speed limit. And so I am merging right in with the vehicles here, and even though it doesn't seem like I'm going that fast because I'm sitting so tall, the Unimog does cruise along at these freeway speeds just perfectly fine. And you can tell here is a bit of tire noise from these large 46-inch diameter, 15.5-inch wide tread. That's a pretty aggressive mud terrain tire, but even at these freeway speeds, it is really not that noisy. It's perfectly acceptable. With the transmission set in the auto shift mode, the Unimog just naturally downshifts as needed, and it doesn't have to downshift all that much to still have plenty of torque to accelerate with all the torque that this engine has. And all the torque of this engine is really a benefit when passing semi-trucks like this, or also trying to accelerate onto the freeway at freeway speeds. I found that the torquey engine made it very easy to merge in with traffic moving along at freeway speeds. And also the width of the Unimog is a little bit less than that of semi-trucks. Even though I'm sitting as tall as it's fairly easy to pass them and merge in with them and or drive with them. One thing I felt while driving the Unimog was that because it is a larger vehicle and it does have these larger tires, and it definitely has this feeling of strength and power that you could really harm another vehicle or person if you did hit them. I definitely took things careful, made sure I kept a safe driving distance and also a safe driving speed between with the other vehicles on the road, and also gave plenty of time to slow down and re-accelerate if needing to keep that distance between our vehicles. As you can see, sitting up tall like this is a nice advantage because you can see down over the guardrail, even over the trees on the side, and get certainly a much better view and see what's happening around you and up in front of you, as well as the views around you. With this Unimog's 33,000 pound gross vehicle weight rating and also a substantial trailer weight rating, slowing down from freeway speeds to a complete stop on these air brakes with this Unimog being unloaded is touchy, and so it did take a little bit of adjustment to that, as well as the gear downshifts that the transmission makes. You can see here that accelerating the Unimog is a little rough and touchy because it does have a lot of gears to upshift, and it doesn't have a lot of range in RPMs before it has to shift again. So a lot of little upshifts and downshifts, and it does make getting, like, for example, through this light timely just a little bit challenging in dealing with these this slow acceleration and all the different transmission shifts, which does slow down its ability to accelerate. I found that doing some manual shifting or even putting the transmission into neutral when when deaccelerating was actually a lot smoother than letting the transmission downshift on its own. Because of this very commanding view in the Unimog, it's easy to see where these construction cones are on the right or other things to get around them. So it's fairly easy to drive it, and because you can almost see exactly where the fenders are and so forth. Driving over these road tracks was a little bit rough, as you can see, and the air suspension seats definitely help with smoothing that out. One advantage of all these gears that the Unimog has in the low gearing is that when traffic is moving slowly like this, you can just kind of crawl along and not let it upshift or downshift. And that was a lot more comfortable than speeding up and going through all the upshifts and then just slowing right back down and going through all the downshifts again. So that is an advantage of these, the transmission and your ability to fully control it. One thing you can't hear in the Unimog is the turn signal indicator. It is fairly quiet, at least for the microphone with the camera where it's picking it up. And one of the things I'm doing here is I'm actually looking around trying to find just like even a little dirt parking lot that I can go and test out the four-wheel drive system and the lockers that this does has, front, rear, and center. Unfortunately, I never could find any dirt parking lot to test out the four-wheel drive system, or even dirt embankment to test out some of the articulation and suspension movement. So that was unfortunate, but I was able at least coming up here to test a turning radius of the Unimog, which was impressive. You can see here I am getting used to these air brakes and able to slow it down much more smoothly now. Now here I'm driving down this little small street. As you can see, it's a single lane in one direction and two in the other direction, or a little less than two. I am trying to test out the full turning radius. Here I do a slight over the curb, which with 46-inch tires, it's certainly easy to do. I am at full lock, turning around in roughly about 3 lanes wide. I go a little bit over that into this driveway here, but that's it, about 3 lanes. Pretty remarkable turning radius for a fairly large vehicle. Way to go, Unimog. Especially these massive tires. Now, the Unimog is certainly not a beach cruiser or city cruiser, as I'm doing here, looking around for a good spot to go and park it and do a parking test and test out a couple of things I wanted to try out. But nonetheless, it does work fine. Driving on these narrower streets, or where there's potentially cars that could pull out from the side, is a little disconcerting, because you do have to be able to stop it or maneuver it quickly. So you just have to be able to pay attention and look out. Unfortunately, with a good commanding view, you can at least see quite a ways ahead and around these corners of the buildings to see if a vehicle is coming out. Now, in case you're wondering, the joystick that's in the middle there is to control the hydraulics, the different hydraulic circuits, front and rear, tip the bed that this one has in it, the dump bed. And then there's also some control switches for the selectable lockers and some other functions I never did try out or really even attempt to figure out. It is a pretty Spartan interior, fairly simple. It's certainly a working interior, but it is comfortable and fairly roomy, even though some of the controls here in the middle do get a little bit in the way of what you can place there in that center console. And hence why you see my information, the manual, and some other information and stuff they travel with over on the passenger seat. You can see here as these cars pull away from me that the acceleration of the Unimog is not as fast as the vehicles around. This is in fully automated shifting mode, so it is a little bit slower probably on accelerating because I can't control exactly where the RPMs are, but the automatic transmission does keep it pretty much precisely right within its sweet spot on the engine RPMs. So okay for driving around town, but just a little bit slower in the acceleration.
There are some hills. Florida is not the place for dirt or hills. Oh, that's a tight road. I need to go down that road. Marine Educational Center. Alright. Somehow, somewhere.
Now when executing this right-hand turn here, you can see it's fairly tight with that pickup truck sticking out from the parking space on the end, and then these trees sticking out on the left-hand side there. The Unimog is only about a little over 150-inch wheelbase, so it's not that long of a wheelbase, so it's fairly maneuverable, and it's just a little under 20 feet in total length. But nonetheless, it does take a little bit of effort to not only make these sharper turns, but also park it like I'm doing here. Now right here, as I shifted it out of reverse into drive, for some reason or other, it just didn't shift quite right. And sometimes this automated transmission, automated shifting does that. It only did to me a couple of times. This was one of those times. One thing you might notice here is the rapid shifting. Even though I'm only going about 3 or 4, maybe 5 miles an hour at the most right here, the Unimog already shifts out of second into third or even beyond going at these slower speeds. So it definitely has some very low gearing, even in its standard transfer case range, not the working or crawler gears. And this Unimog has 2 transfer cases, both a working and a crawler transfer case, which each one allows to use the additional or the same 8 forward and 8 reverse gears of the standard transmission in those. So it really provides for a total of 24 forward and 24 reverse gears. So for very low range crawling, and all the way down in the Unimog spec book, I saw that it could cover 9 feet in 1 hour in its crawler gear, lowest crawler gear at normal engine RPMs. Parking it here is trying to get the tires to just touch the curb, and of course at the same time not have the tires go over the curb. So I was being very careful about that. go, starting up the Unimog. Air pressures are good. Glow plugs off, of course. As you can see here, backing up is a little bit jerky, and that's just really the gearing in the Unimog, and also obviously the visibility right behind the bed is inadequate, and so it's really good to do a walk around of the vehicle or make sure you can see clear behind that bed before backing up. One thing to note while you can take a good look at the center console there is that this Unimog does have power windows, as I believe all the North American spec ones did. So the controls are up there in that center console, along with also, as I mentioned before, the front, center, and rear differential locks, as well as also the working and crawler gear differential selectors. There's also a few other buttons up there to do some things, as well as some buttons that were not in use as far as options go. You can also just make out the two radio DIN slots up and the headliner there in the center, and also the overhead lights or upper lights to go above the plow, which this one was used for plow service previously.
Head towards the freeway.
You can tell that these bumps make the drive a little bit bouncy, but it is acceptable, but it is a little bit wearing, perhaps, if you were doing a lot of city driving in this.
Oh, we actually went that way on the beach. Water.
One benefit of these very low gears that the Unimog has is in slow traffic like this, you can just crawl along at a very slow speed, and instead of stopping and re-accelerating again like I'm doing right here, just crawling along at a slow speed until this traffic starts moving again. You can see here that while driving and trying to accelerate into traffic is a bit challenging with the Unimog because of all its gears, and you don't have a lot of acceleration range within each gear. So as I'm accelerating, it's only able to be on the power for about a second or so before it has to shift again, and then shift again in another second or two. And so it does make accelerating into traffic and so forth a little bit challenging. You just have to put your turn signal on and really work a little bit harder to merge into traffic. Another thing while driving the Unimog or another similar truck is that right here I get kind of stuck in this right-hand turn lane that I didn't know was a right-hand only turn lane, and I really did not want to go right, and yet there isn't much else you can do at this point. You can't quickly stop or merge into another lane, so you pretty much just have to go with the flow and adjust to where traffic and or the lane is taking you, as I did here. Another thing to note when also making these hard turns, you notice I swing it out a little bit wider and have to quickly kind of correct it back because the steering wheel doesn't recenter very quickly. I actually noticed that even though this wheelbase is about 150 inches, whereas my Sprinter van's 170, it seemed like I had to take turns actually wider in the Unimog. And I think that's mostly just because of the extra width and also the slower reaction of the steering comparatively. Believe it or not, this is going freeway speeds of about 65 miles an hour in the Unimog, which it just doesn't look like it because of sitting up so much higher. Okay, here's 65 miles an hour at about 2100 RPM. What I just said there is I'm going 65 miles an hour at 2100 RPM. A little bit bouncy, not too bad. One thing about driving the Unimog is you sit up so high that speeds seem very different than other driving experiences, as I'm going much faster here in that 65 to 70 mile an hour range, even though it doesn't look it. That's where it's right there. Okay, so now I just passed it. Now where I need to get back to.
tires, smooth them out. Okay, I'm going to be forced to go straight or right. It says right only. Okay. Right it is.
One benefit of the Unimog and other vehicles that do sit up higher like this is obviously, as you can tell, I can see way further down the road. I can see what's going on, and I can quickly react to take a different lane as I'm doing here to get around this traffic and pull another U-turn here. And I just gently went over the center median curve just to feel and test what that's like, and that's what that bounciness is. Get ready, here's an acceleration test coming up. It's about as fast as the Unimog accelerates. I'm talking to myself a little bit here as I'm trying to figure out where to go to both find some dirt to try out the four-wheel drive system, which I never was able to find, and also to find a place to go to lunch as it's getting to be that time. You can see those Robotreks are a bit bouncy once again. Notice how the auto shifting transmission nicely downshifts when deaccelerating here. Now, because the Unimog is a pretty wide vehicle, you definitely need some space when turning into driveways like this to both slow down and make the turn. was looking for a place to get some lunch, but it turns out this whole entire shopping center was shut down due to some police and or other emergency activity. Now, when driving the Unimog, you can see sometimes I have to really wrangle with the steering wheel in order to get it back to center, as it doesn't necessarily track right back to center. And obviously accelerating and merging into this faster traffic here at a speed limit around 45 or 50 is a little bit challenging, but nonetheless it works.
All right.
Thank you for watching this full driving tour and walk around video of this 2006 Mercedes-Benz Unimog U500 North American spec long wheelbase. My comments on this: it's certainly different than my typical videos that I post on camper van conversions, living out of camper vans, traveling in them, doing off-road adventures in them, and also other tips around camping in that, and also the testing of different expedition vehicles coming up for this expedition camper build out that I'll do. Please do subscribe, and you can certainly see more videos on my expedition camper build out to come.